This is Regenerative Skills, the podcast helping you to learn the skills and solutions to create an abundant and connected future. I'm your host, Oliver Gaucher. New Society Publishers is your gateway to a regenerative future. They're not just about books, they're about transforming lives and communities through the power of knowledge and action. Their mission is simple: to inspire and empower individuals to create a more just, sustainable, and compassionate world. They envision a future where every person has the tools and resources they need to thrive in harmony with nature, where communities are resilient and interconnected, and where equity and justice are fundamental principles guiding our collective journey. If you subscribe right now to their newsletter at newsociety.com, you'll be the first to receive sneak peeks at new content and get discounts on upcoming title releases. You'll even get an exclusive discount code on your first purchase of books, ebooks, or audiobooks. So sign up today at newsociety.com. Hey there everybody, and welcome back. Today we'll be continuing with the second part of my discussion with Anne Van Leeuwen from Bodemzicht in the Netherlands. In case you've missed the first part, I recommend you go back for some context where Anne spoke about how she and her partner Ricardo got started in farming and the evolution of their farm at the original location. In this second half, we'll pick up where Anne begins to talk about their new farm, how they found it, and the vision that they have for its development. We also talk about the things that they are planning to do differently from the startup of the first farm, given the unusual opportunity to start relatively from scratch. We explore complementary farm enterprises to ensure regular cash flow, navigating the complexities of human relationships with multi-stakeholder businesses, and by the end, we also go over her membership and participation with the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture, or IARA, a new lobbying organization working to shape regenerative ag policy at the European Union level. We left off right where we started to talk about their new 45-hectare farm, so let's jump right back in.
Now we've moved to a 45-hectare farm, which is a whole different ballgame. Yeah.
So tell me about that process, because you faced all the same challenges of looking for land when you were getting Bodemzicht started. And this is a much larger farm, but at this point you had a lot of social support in your land search and in your financing. Tell me what was different that time around.
It was very different. Well, actually, the farm we're at right now is a Landland farm, which is Landland is an organization in the Netherlands that was not there when we started, but that is there to realize regenerative community farms, basically. So that's amazing. And Landland is also an organization that I was myself involved in because I met Wouter Veer, the founder of Landland, quite early in the process when I started with Bodemzicht in Malden. And it was I think the second year of the farm that I met him. And basically just an amazing person that you meet. And I met so many amazing people since we started the farm, which is fantastic. And he had a lot of money. He had earned a lot of money from an old business he had, 10 million euros. And he wanted to put that in a fund, and he was developing that, and that sort of developed into Landland. And I've always advised Landland, this is great, this is what we need, because I was also struggling with, what we can do is focus on propagating farmers, because we need more farmers. We need more farmers to get this happening, because otherwise it's just not happening. And at the current agricultural schools, we cannot learn this. So with our learning place, we were at the moment where we thought, okay, we are taking in apprentices. We want them to also become entrepreneurs and start their own amazing farm. But we can put time and effort in propagating farmers, but if there's no place where they can farm in the Netherlands, it's where are they going to go? Where are they going to start? So, and then it turned out that Wouter was exactly working on the other side of that question. So if I can get these places, how do I get farmers? How do I get... So we also found each other in that search. And then Landland was born as an organization, and it's a beautiful model, because the model is that sort of the commons merge with regenerative. So the idea is that the ownership of the farm is split. You have the juridical ownership, that's part of the Landland Foundation. and in which the foundation will always safeguard that it will be a regenerative community farm. It's not going to be sold to any speculative, because there are a lot of speculative tendencies here in the Netherlands, and that the business should be rolling, which is very important part also. It should be working as a business. And then there's the creative ownership. And for me, it was always really important. The creative ownership should be from the farmers. The farmers should be the ones that sort of, function as entrepreneurs in this context. And it should, they should
make actual decisions
what
for
they do.
land management.
Make the decisions for the land management, otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And also they need to be able to feel that ownership, to invest, to do all that dearly needed, but also an investment that asks a lot from people to regenerate the place. It just asks so much. So you need to feel that ownership and that decision-making power over there. And the economic ownership is then for the community, because everybody can co-own the farm, become a co-owner of the farm, and get a tiny bit of interest if the business is rolling. Mm-hmm. But not like the normal speculative interest, but something that befits this kind of businesses.
Yeah, that still allows a respectable profit for the farmer themselves.
Yes, and just make sure that everybody wins, because that's the whole point.
Yeah, to incentivize this community opt-in, this investment from all of the stakeholders.
Yeah, and not just a shareholder that can, push for maximize profit kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. So, and that model was born. And yeah, actually, I thought it was so great that I worked for, and so important that this initiative was there, that I worked for 1 day a week for Lenteland, and also to help them start and think about how to make this happen. But I never intended to become a Lenteland farmer. That was never part of the plan, because I was happily situated in my farm. And the place was becoming beautiful, because it started so degraded, but we had now this lively, thriving place. It was running. We had our team, we had our market, everything settled. And actually, this last year, Ricardo and me were thinking, finally, after 4 years of startup feel, we got to have our landing year. We got to go on holidays, and, amazing things. So we thought it's going to be our easy year, where we can lean back a little bit. And
completely rebuilding a farm from scratch with however many hectares more than the previous place.
Yeah, and then two things happened. So one was that it turned out we were not in the right place, and we did have a little bit of gut feeling about that. But yeah, it happened to be really the case. So we had fundamental different, in a way, sort of different visions for the place in Malden, and it was somebody else's estate. So in the end, if that doesn't fit, it's also not a good place to stay, because you're investing also in a place that with a lot of insecurity of where that investment goes, but also for your own future and sanity is not good. So very respectfully, we parted our ways, because we learned also a lot there. But it was very stressful for us to get that realization, because to be a farmer without a place in a farm is one of the most horrible things that can happen. So we had a lot of stress about that. And
I remember that. Yeah, you guys were going through our program at that time, and in that shift, you were thinking about it. Was interesting because very few times do especially young farmers go through an experience where you're actually completely uprooting your place and setting up in another. And I would imagine you've learned so much from this process. I would love to know what you are doing differently from your first setup based on these experiences and what you've learned.
Yeah. One of the things I learned, and I think is super important for everybody out there who wants to start a farm, is to get as much clarity as you can get on paper before you start somewhere.
In what regard? There's a lot of things.
There's a lot of things, but I think clarity in terms of lease, but in terms of vision is also super important. If you're working with somebody who owns the land, actually the best thing would be to write the context together, or to really sit down, to really go deep, and to also write that down and articulate that and have it somewhere on paper. Because even though we were very much aligned in many levels, it turned out in the end it didn't fit. So
Yeah.
It's also because we both changed over the years. I mean, that also happens, and that's also inevitable. And also because my feeling of urgency only is growing. You know, I don't want to slow down. I have no intention whatsoever of slowing down. Actually, the other way around. I do like a year I can lean back a little bit, but I'm not gonna slow down. Not in operation or in what we want to do, what we can do in this cultural change, as you can say, in farming as well. So to get clarity, not to have things not on paper. That will be my biggest thing. So you can make any kinds of agreement, but have it on paper, have it articulated, have it signed. Make sure that what you sign is what you're aiming for. And the biggest learning curve that I've had is you better have the difficult conversations before than that you have them after 2 or 3 years.
Or when they're really necessary to sort out. It's funny because this is what you were saying about writing all this stuff down, having these difficult conversations, anticipating conflicts before they come up. This was everything that I learned as well from my experience of leaving the farm in Guatemala and getting established on this new one in Spain. Yeah. Basically the exact same thing.
Yeah, you also had that and the thing is, I completely understand that when you're in that situation, it also feels very fragile. So you think, oh, this might be my only chance to farm or whatever, or this is, especially because we're also talking about how rare it is that you get a chance. But even then, if you have that opportunity, that also means that you are good enough to farm over there. That means that you have qualities that could also land somewhere else. So don't be too afraid to really articulate what you need and what is important to you, and also to put boundaries to what is not okay for you. Because they will bite you in the end. You know, they will come back like a little boomerang.
They will. Yeah. In my version of that experience, it wasn't change of priorities with me and a landlord. I was a co-owner, but it was a collaboration with other people that we got into it. And it wasn't so much of worrying about the fragility. It was going into it too optimistically is the other way. We ended up skipping steps and not being very diligent in our agreements and writing things down. It's like, oh, we'll get to it. It'll come up later. We're not going to have any major fights or disagreements up until then. Wow. By the time you're having disagreements, you're already not in the mindset to be compromising or to be lenient. And by then it's kind of too late. You should have foreseen that first.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that was also, I'm also stubbornly optimistic sometimes. And I also tend to do that. Like, oh, it's okay. We can practically solve that. But actually, it's so good to go through that. So one of the things I've definitely learned. So here with the team, we really want to sit down this summer to write a context together for the farm. And to get sort of real clarity on everything. And that's what also something that does very beautifully is to be really transparent in the statute, so in the statutory descriptions of exactly what is the deal, you know, how does
the
it work?
Details of what is being agreed
the nitty gritty details. That's so important. Spend a lot of time.
That's really good.
So important. Yeah. And it's also good to take really the time for that before you start farming, because I think once you start farming, and certainly when it's your first year, you sort of start up so many things to do at once.
Yeah.
That you don't also, it's hard to find the time and space to do that unless it's like a winter further, but then you're already stressed about your first planning for your garden next year. So
there's no time when you have the extra time and space to go into the details of that on your own accord. That's so nice that they have at least a template that you started. Yeah, so the template was, and it was also something that I've known very well because I was there one day a week. And then, 2 things happened. Lenteland already set up 3 farms, and they're rolling already, which is amazing. And then they bought this 4th farm, this very big farm of 45 hectares in Lochem. And there was a sollicitatie procedure, like people applying. And that sollicitatie didn't go as planned. Actually, it went really unexpectedly. The business plan that was presented was really not good enough for the place.
And that was not expected. And that was actually right 1 week after that we realized that we were really in the wrong place at the end of last season, so November. So suddenly there were two, for me, unexpected giant things happening because I really thought we were gonna settle in Malden, because we also got a house, which took us 4 years to get a house next to the farm. So I suddenly thought, wow, there are two unexpected stars in the sky, and perhaps we need to draw a line between them. So I quit at Lenteland to apply to this farm. When I saw that there was so serious other perspective for this place, and then we spent the whole winter. Yeah, so there was no perspective for this farm in terms of farming. So everybody was like, okay, what are we going to do now? And yeah, so then I quit at Lenteland. That's the one day that I was still working at Lenteland. And I decided it was not an I decision, it's always a we decision when I say I, because I like to work and collaborate a lot and think and work with other people, to apply to this farm. Crazy, yeah. So we spent the whole winter working on a new plan. And two of the applicants in the process we thought were amazing people to have on this team, but not necessarily in the constitution in which they were presenting a plan. So from two different groups. So we invited them to try again with us. And then we applied with 4 entrepreneurs. And it was crazy because it was in a winter where we were writing a business plan, whole different ball game, because this farm is, I said we started with 150K. This farm is only for buying, and that is a loose of all the work that needs to be done, and the exploitation costs. The costs of this farm alone are 4.3 million.
Yeah, that's a whole different, very different stakes for this operation. Yeah.
Total different stakes. And I would have never done this 4 years ago. Never, ever. And I should have never done that 4 years ago. And now it's still challenging, for sure. For sure. But yeah, so we spent the whole winter making the numbers work, actually. That was the biggest thing, because we wrote a beautiful plan and building up a new organization as well. At the same time, getting to know and to know each other deeply.
Yeah.
So very intense winter. Very intense winter. And then at the 5th of February, we presented our plan to Lenteland. And and then we heard that we could start. And well, still they had a lot of very good critical feedback. And that's good, because that's what makes it better. But it was good enough. And we moved to the farm ourselves the 2nd of March. And now we're setting up everything. Yeah, because we're already too late for the season, so it's been a crazy ride.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I'm curious too, if you're comfortable talking about it. What were the profitable enterprises in that application that were needed to convince a funder that you could, well, make back the initial massive investment of a few million, probably along with all of the startup costs of the actual enterprises? What is it that gave them that confidence for that loan in something as risky as farming?
Yeah, well, I think it's good to mention Lenteland is not a financer or a financing entity only. So the DNA of Lenteland is that their aim is to start regenerative community farms. And they also look in a different way at financing, not in the old classical way. So not the short-term, high profit expectation, whatever, which is completely unrealistic. So that's being said, it's an organization that also helps the starting farms to build up the farm, also as an organization. Also their support in marketing, etc. You can ask for all kinds of support. So it's actually more of a collaboration than a financing only, but the numbers need to work, which is exceptionally challenging for an expensive farm such as this, because how many carrots do you need to sell?
Yeah, this is exactly why I asked. Yeah,
usually
there's a pretty low profit margin on most of the things that you could produce on a farm.
Yes, and that's still the case. So one of the reasons why Lenteland also dared to buy this farm is that there's also a campsite at the farm. So there's already a sort of a steady flow of money coming in from a campsite.
Complementary
which
enterprises,
is really good and necessary, because it's just ridiculous otherwise how expensive farms like these are.
Yeah.
So what we did is actually, our plan as we presented it was not only a farm, not only production, but we presented it as a European regenerative hub that is anchored here in the Achterhoek in Lochem, in the place where we are.
Yeah.
So, and we have 3 main strategies that are part of the farm. We have, it's a farm, well, we farm, of course, we farm of 45 hectares. It's a farm where you can connect with farming, with food, with regeneration, with yourself, with soil. So there's also an activity program. It's still a learning place. So that's also where the work of Bodemzicht Foundation comes in. So we organize all kinds of things, and residencies with artists, chefs, policymakers, all kinds of cultural programming. So that's also part of the place. And the third line is to stay. You can stay at this farm. There's a campsite. There's actually also a very beautiful historical little tea building where you can also rent. We're renovating it right now. And that was always something that I noticed, that there was a longing for people who came to Bodemzicht, because they always asked, oh, can we also have lunch? And I said, no, sorry. We're farming, too busy, we're not going to eat, But I just incapable in infrastructure, in team, in time, in everything to organize that. But it's always something I thought, oh, such a shame we cannot do it, because actually it's through, that's it, through food.
Sure, that's the missing piece if you're going to come and see agriculture.
Yes,
you need your plate to see.
Yeah. So the only thing we did was pluck some, leaves from the garden. That was already great for a lot of people, but it's not the same. So in the staying and in the connecting to build that also in this place as business lines, we also. So one of the people we invited from Roos is also a chef. So that's really nice. He's a chef and a host. And also runs the campsite. And Dan, who is our other business partner in this place, amazing guy, very young energy, and goes in, fully energized, which is really good for a place like this. That is what
Absolutely.
you need. And totally in love with trees. So we have these 3 big lines, and then we have 9 actually different enterprises that we worked on. And a very complex Excel for getting the budgeting right, because there are a lot of feedbacks. Yeah, and assumptions. So we wanted an Excel, and there was also a question from Lenteland: how can we build a model for this farm in which we can only change the assumptions, and then the whole thing recalculates itself. So we are always on track. And Dan will also start very passionate about trees and we're gonna plant agroforestry system for sure, 20 kilometers of fruit trees, nuts and berry bushes. So that's going to be a big chunk of the farming enterprise. But we also wanted to start a tree nursery, which is new for us. But we are planning, at least 2,000 and perhaps even 4,000 air prune boxes, in which we will grow trees from seed, very strong trees from seed. And not almost all trees in the Netherlands are sold like way too big with very sadly cut off roots. Yeah. And we're, perhaps the image. Yeah.
No, we should talk about this, because this is exactly what I'm doing as the first enterprise on my place, is the tree nursery. Something that I've talked about and had a few interviews on in the past.
Yeah. Well, no, exactly. That is the idea to, we've got the first pallets here. It's extreme load of pallets recycled to build the airport boxes.
Nice.
And so that's going to be an important part of the enterprise. Then we have the garden, which is going to be twice as big as we had in Malden. It's almost fully there, but it was too rainy yet to put down the full garden. So the last bit still has to be made. And we're going to have some arable farming, but we want to perennialize that as much as possible. So thinking about green asperges, for example, and other plants on which we have sort of crop fields. And then we have animals in between, small herd of animals. So we have our chickens here. We moved our chickens and the chicken mobiles and the egg mobiles. And we would love to add cows and sheep, but I'm only going to start that once I have a business model in place. So I'm going to do some visits to make that happen, because it's not so easy on a smaller scale to make it work.
Imagine.
Yeah. So that's the farm side. So that's already quite a lot of enterprises. And then we have, and the beauty about well, really going to go for radical diversity. So the trees are going to be as diverse as possible, as unique as possible. So it's sort of the other end of the spectrum of the monocultural tree farm or tree nursery. And so what we would love to have in the end is that you have this beautiful little basket with plums in which every plum is sort of almost different.
Yeah.
And you can sell that. And that resiliency in a little basket, fantastic.
That's beautiful.
So, yeah, and a taste experience.
Well,
So,
I would
that's what we're
imagine
going to
too, with
work on.
such diversity in the trees, you could also extend out the harvest season significantly. Right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And also make it a little bit more, not all in one go, because that's going to be very intense for such a huge landscape. Yeah. So that's what we're gonna do, and then we have activities, events, and the learning place. So those are three things that we're doing. So we are gonna have tours, but you can also book a space here. We hope. We still want to rebuild the shed, so we can make it sort of the heart of the farm where everything comes together. This is beautiful old historic shed that is a little bit. You have to see that it's beautiful and old right now, but if you would invest in it a little bit, it could be amazing place again, where actually it's not very cold half of the year also. And to give courses as well, to invite people to be here and to experience regeneration and have a combi, for example, with a lunch, or so a lively place, but also for the local community, because that's one of the first things we want to have a community space. We want to have a place where people also feel welcome. So one of the first things we did was have a lot of coffees with the neighbors. It was actually really nice. Yeah, great neighbors. Also the conventional farmer neighbors. I mean, the context is very different from the old farm. It's way more an agrarian context, and it's really lovely to speak with our neighbors and to see, even though we look at it through very different eyes, at the same place, we can help each other out, and there's a lot of willingness to do that, and that's so great to see.
That is really wonderful.
Yeah, it's really wonderful, and we feel really blessed with how we've been received here. Although we also know, of course, that they'll probably think we're the weirdos, but that's okay. I mean, I can also imagine that if some people land in a place and they start doing things in a very different way, then if I was one of those farmers, I would also think, let them prove that first. Yeah, before.
Definitely.
I can totally get it. So, and a lot of respect for how we were received here. And the nice thing is also that Daan is also from this region. So he's very grounded in this region. And that's also very good. And and then we have the campsite, which is wonderful. Well, it's now still was this quite a very open landscape, the Dutch love the really open landscape, which is very often also a pretty degraded landscape with just monocultural ryegrass, forever. Sure. And so it was this kind of campsite where you have caravans and people just look out over, hundreds of meters of flat pasture that we're changing. So it's going to be a food forest campsite where you can sort of pick the food when you open your tent. So we did the first transplantations of bushes. We put the first tents up. So we now have 5 bell tents up for the season. The campsite is open, so people are very welcome to come and stay over. And and renovating the other place. And then we're working on a kitchen so we can really start to properly cook here as well.
Amazing. Man, so many things happening so fast. I can only imagine how hard it was even to find a moment to have this conversation with me. I'm really glad that it worked out. And
I haven't unpacked all my boxes yet.
You're still in the moving process. That's fresh.
I'm still moving, but
But so one more thing I'd like to touch on before we wrap up today is the work that you're also doing at a European level, because you are one of the founding members of EARA, the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture, which Climate Farmers was instrumental in helping to set up, and is a big portion of how the collective efforts of our early community are now communicating at the European Commission level in order to help to inform changes and adaptations to the new common agricultural policy, as a little preamble to what you guys are working on. How has that membership been for you in getting your voice heard and understanding from other farmers around what is needed to facilitate a move towards many of these things that we've talked about already, getting younger farmers in, getting access to land, making regenerative enterprises possible, if not more accessible? How has that been for you?
Such a joy. I mean, I'm so happy to be part of EADA, to be surrounded by these amazing people, and grateful for climate farmers for making us realize at that climate farming conference, like, hey, this is what we actually need. So, no, it's such a relief because everybody's working so hard on their farms. It's such a relief to be in a place, in a community where you're actually all working to make this change happen, and also all in this different context, but also thoroughly and deeply understanding what regeneration is about, what kind of process it entails, and with such a respect, deep knowledge, and openness to share experience, insights. And no, it has been, I really love it. I'm also part of the steering committee of EADA, so we're a lot of with a great operational team of Natasha and Anna and Simon, other amazing people connected, supporting us also as farmers. And yeah, it's just like you feel like, oh, you can breathe, you know, like you're surrounded by people who speak the same language. We all face sort of similar challenges in different contexts, so we can help each other out, which is just fantastic. And we learn so much together. So for me, it's really, I mean, I hardly look forward to Zoom meetings, in all honesty, but those Zoom meetings I look forward to.
I can imagine.
Also, just to check in with everyone and to see how they're doing. And it's so great to have such a diverse group of people, because we have people in there, you know, who farm on 0.4 hectares up to people who farm on 4,000 hectares. We have, you know, farmers from Hungary, farmers from UK, from Spain up to Finland. So it's super diverse, and young farmers, people who have, just a few years of farming experience to, you know, like legends such as William from Scotland, who is already for decades and has a giant amount of experience. So it's just a joy to be in that context. And also, I've never worked so efficiently with such a big group of people that, well, actually we just met, but it feels like you've already known each other though. So that's the great thing. So we also, because of the amazing operational team who supported the whole process, but we went for our first conference with EADA, and we sort of in 2 days built a whole organization with consent, just whoppa, klaar, mission, vision, policy paper written. It's just craziness how effective that can be. And we also have now different focus groups. So we have a political strategy group, for example, in which people really focus on the political and policy part of the transition that's needed. And yeah, we're setting up now, actually, I think once you publish this, that's amazing. New EADA farm members can join. So if you are a regenerative farmer, you want to be part of this amazing network, please subscribe at eada.farm. You can let us know that you're out there. There will be a sort of a short selection procedure, because we do want to make sure that this is the group for you, A, but also B, that it will always be a farmer-led and farmer-steered organization. And that regeneration is at the heart of the people who enter this collective. And what we recently did is that actually we presented an alternative CAP strategy pathway, completely worked out. So policymakers the idea was, how can we make something that is clear, easy, also easily be measurable, and that can be executed within the current juridical framework of the CAP, without too many fundamental changes, but something that is also practically implementable. And that's what the new policy paper is about, the new strategy for the CAP. That is also something you can read on eada.farm. There's also a lot of research that has gone into it. But basically the proposal is, like, of course, regeneration is context specific, in every place is different, but if you bring it back to the core, how can we make it how can we measure the regenerative process, how we can be sure that somebody is regenerating over time, and putting that effort in. Then key indicators are biomass, root exudates, and that all connected to photosynthetic activity. So what we need to measure is this net primary productivity of a place, which is sort of a translation of increasing photosynthetic activity, you could say, and soil health. And our proposal is that if those are used, are key indicators of regenerative farming, and you can actually measure that by using satellite data. Mm-hmm. That the EU already also has a lot of programs running there, the Copernicus program and other programs. Then it becomes A, doable, B, financially manageable, but also C, you can base a whole subsidy system that can be such an important lever for making this transition in Europe towards regenerative farming. You can make it feasible and executable. So that is the argument we basically make at the core. And we see now that the cap is currently inhibiting this transition, while actually it could be a key lever in making that transition.
Yeah, and this is really exciting. I'll make sure not only to link to the website where people can apply to be members, but also this document that recently came out, which we've been working to disseminate through the Climate Farmers Network and just show other people that this is what farmers are capable of contributing to a process that directly affects them, and why it's so important to get their opinion and their experience on this. And the last thing that I want to explore here is, we're talking about changing the metrics for measurement of success for a program like the CAP. You talked about the net productivity of the landscape as a proxy for photosynthetic efficiency of having multiple layers of vegetation on a farm. What are the metrics and measurements that you're looking at on your own farm to show your improvement and your increase towards an area of success that is unique to you and your collaborators?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the danger with metrics is always that there's so much going on in regenerative farming that you could end up with having this whole list of things you need to measure. So then you need like a giant amount of time and to get even the measurements done.
Yeah, trying to measure complexity, right? That's the difference.
Yes, try to measure complexity. And that's what I also think is the beauty of the net primary productivity proposal, is that, perhaps it is possible to get that complexity in one or two, and soil health in those measurements. Mm-hmm. So I think if you bring it back to the core, that might be it. But for myself at the farm, and Lenteland is, by the way, also working on setting up our own metric system. I know you've been working on it as well. But actually, we would love to measure at least 3 strains. So the ecological, the social, and the economic measurements of how things develop at the farm. And we would like to see a positive increase in all those areas. And what we've done now for the ecological part, we figured out a pathway that we can walk, and I'm using certain apps to do basic inventarization of plants, of birds, and then amphibians, of course.
Of course, amphibians.
Of course. And then so that's what we just set up. And it's always challenging because I need now all the zero measurements, but I also need everything else being done. So that's always the challenge of not skipping the zero measurements.
I'm still working on my baseline measurements as well.
It's
essential, but it gets in the way of other work.
Yes, it tends to get in the way. And we're taking soil samples, of course. So I've done basic soil measurements with also soil measurement of basic biological activity, bacterial, fungi, ratio, etc. But we also want our own samples to be stored. So if you talk about baseline, I want them to be stored somewhere. So if we have the opportunity later to get them sampled with even more data, an opportunity there, then we have them. So that's also something we've been doing. We've been taking different samples at different height, like 10, 30, 60. So we can get that stored in different parts of the field. And it's extensive, 45 hectares. So that's a lot of sampling. And then, at least for me, it's extensive. For other farmers who are listening, they think, okay, this is the Dutch context. Yeah. But then we'd love to take water samples. I still need to do that. Yeah. Water quality samples. That's important. And then for the social, and I'm a bird watcher, by the way. So The fun thing is like, yeah, we do this measurements and I do that and calculate it around with the timer. And then you get this data set, which is great. But I'm all the time bird watching. So from a personal perspective, I see it already happening. It's amazing. We put some houses up. I see the red tail is starting to breed here. The house martin is here. And I guess it wasn't there because there were no houses for it. But they are there right now. So I already see a lot of things happening. So that's beautiful to see happen. What we also did, and I think we shouldn't underestimate when you talk about storytelling, is make really good photos and videos of the baseline.
Yeah.
So you have that image and you can compare it to how the landscape develops over time.
Pictures worth 1,000 words.
Not so much. Yeah, it's not a metric, but it's a qualitative metric, you could say. And then for the social aspects, and I would love to have the satellite data, of course, if we can get it done for the net primary productivity. And then we have the social part. We are counting visitor numbers, people engaged, but also people really locally engaged, like as a separate group, because I think it's very important that also locally you can clearly see a growth, hyper-local in people connected to the farm, feeling that this is also their place. And that's super important to make a regenerative farm work. So that's something we do, but we also do social media interactions. But for example, also amount of emails, like how many interactions are going on anyway. Although I love to give that job away to somebody else.
Fair enough, yeah.
The giant amount of emails. Yeah, and then, so that's social interactions and also qualitative statements. So you can do some small cases interviews, how people experience the place. But also about how happy they are with the vegetable box, for example. So this is also
that's super valuable feedback, especially for how you're interacting with customers, definitely.
Of course, yeah.
Man, this is really interesting. I really hope that the tool and the program that we're developing can continue to be helpful along this process. I know a lot of people, especially in your position, who have become focus points for young farmers trying new techniques and the possibilities of regeneration. It's difficult oftentimes to communicate the complexity of what we're working on, especially when you're trying to bring biodiversity back to a space and increase water runoff quality and all these other metrics that people don't necessarily associate with farming. They're more associated with conservation or ecological restoration, but they definitely integrate into this model of farming. And so having a way of communicating that, of being able to demonstrate the changes over time through a new way of managing an agricultural product is so valuable. And it's helping people who otherwise don't have reference to the type of work that we do, a window into the importance of doing it a different way.
Exactly. And then, of course, you also have the standard things like yield. But it's not like we're only measuring yield. And it's so super important to try to see it holistically. Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Make sure that you don't have these blind spots that develop for simply not working it into the things that you pay attention to and that you monitor.
Yeah, and for the economic part, we have, of course, to think like, is it going well? Are we working towards our net profit situation? Like, how is it break even? And you have your points and your milestones and you have your numbers every year. But I think what is also really important, especially in this model place, is the co-ownership. How many people actually wanted to buy certificates, become co-owner of this place, and get their qualitative statements on that process as well, because it's super important. We were talking before, this is not a farm that can only run on carrots. That we can make this happen together as a community.
Yeah.
And if these people join in, the beauty of the model is that the money that flows to the local corporations, because the Land Foundation has bought this farm, then there's a local corporation that has been started that is the owner also of the buildings in the land. That is us.
Yep.
And as the people become part of this farm, they become co-owner of this farm, the money flows back to the Land Foundation. And with that money, they can buy another farm. So that's how it sort of spreads like a beautiful mycelium is the idea.
Sense. That is lovely.
So yeah, that's a beautiful model. So if people join in enough, then it also works. And we can start spreading the model, and it's also very important, therefore very important economic indicator. So these are the things that we're measuring.
Mm-hmm.
And and then the thing is that most of it you see happening so many things already. I mean, we've been here since the 2nd of March. There's so much going on, but it's already starting. And I recognize the process now because I've been through it before, and it's beautiful.
Yeah. That's really lovely, man. I'm so happy that you guys found a good fit for the new evolution of your farm. I think there's so much more potential here that you're only just starting to scratch the surface of, and it's going to be such a joy to watch your process and your growth in the coming years as well. We have so much to talk about. So many aspects of the enterprises that you mentioned are similar to what I'm setting up here, just on a smaller scale. So I'm sure we'll be catching up and sharing notes from the journey along the way.
I hope so, Oliver. I was thinking, this is going to be our easy year, so I can come and visit, but I have to postpone it a little bit.
That's okay. This is a really,
but I'm really looking forward.
Year for me too. We'll have to do visits to each other's places as soon as possible. I don't know about easy years, but we'll just have to fit time in there.
Yeah, let's do that. That would be awesome.
Well, thanks so much for making time. But before I let you go, can you tell our listeners where they can learn more about your operation and get in touch with you?
Yeah. We have now, we have 2 websites at the moment because we're still sort of in a transit period.
Yep.
2 horrible Dutch names. I'm so sorry for all the international listeners. But one is Bodemzicht.nl. It's a website it's a sort of a transfer website. And there's also a new website already called Gagel.nl. Gagel is actually gale. It's a plant. It's a marshland plant that used to grow everywhere here on this farm, on these 45 hectares, because it used to be a wet heather area.
Sure.
So, but now it has been completely drained and it's become agricultural land.
Mm-hmm.
But the farm is still called het Gagel after this Mirica gale that once grew here. And of course, one of our top priorities, one of our KPIs is bringing this plant back everywhere, as well as 5,000 tree frogs. So you can find more info on gagel.nl. And of course, if you're interested in the Lenteland model, which is now being rolled out in the Netherlands, it's Lenteland. You can look it also up on the internet, lente.land. And EADA is, of course, great also as a reference to have a look at, and that is eada.farm. So I would invite everybody to have a look at these websites.
Fantastic. Yeah. And for all those other people like myself who could never spell those things, I'll link to those in the show notes for this episode to make it easy for you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. You can also follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever you feel like and see what we're up to.
Amazing. Well, Anna, look, it was such a pleasure to catch up with you again. I'm so excited for everything to come. It's a shame that Ricardo couldn't be here for this, but I'm sure he'll get on another episode in the future. And let's stay in close connection.
Yes, let's do that. Thanks a lot, Oliver.
Thanks once again to Anne. I've linked to the farm website and social media accounts of Bodemzicht and Anne herself. You can check those out in the show notes for this episode at regenerativeskills.com. Now, before we wrap this up, just remember that these episodes are only the beginning of the learning resources, design and coaching services, in-person courses, and interactive community that are available through Regenerative Skills. The Discord server is our free community where you can connect with other like-minded listeners, exchange ideas, stories, tips, and resources, as well as interact with me directly and quite a few former guests from this show. Our Instagram account @regen_skills is the best place to see the projects that me and the team are working on, both for clients and collaborators, as well as on our own properties. I'll also be announcing the certification courses, workshops, and gatherings that we've got coming up later this year. If you're interested in getting dedicated support for your own project, you can now schedule a free planning session with one of our team members through the request form on our website. You can also find all the links, show notes, and past resources there at regenerativeskills.com. We truly believe that no matter your experience, your knowledge, abilities, resources, or background, you can be a powerful force for regeneration on this planet, and we're here to help you find your path. So as always, remember to keep taking those little steps every day towards a regenerative future, and I'll be right by your side along the way.